There are two castles. The first is an imposing monument of human ingenuity. Thick walls of quarried stone, iron gates forged in deep furnaces, towers that pierce the sky and command the horizon. Those who built it poured every resource into its outer face, every measure of their wealth and labor, into the surfaces that could be seen, touched, and admired by those who approached from without. For a time, it stood as the supreme image of security, and then the enemy came. Not to storm the gates, but to poison the river, to flood the fields, to cut the supply lines and wait. The castle did not fall from the outside. It collapsed from within, because within, there was nothing capable of standing. The second castle is built differently. It possesses every outer defense the first one does, the walls, the gates, the towers. But at its very center, there is a chamber, a room that no siege engine can reach, that no flood can enter, that no poison can touch, that no force in the visible world can compromise. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most consequential and powerful man in the ancient world, spent the entirety of his reign under siege. War pressed in from every frontier. Plague moved through his empire like a tide, taking millions. Betrayal came from those closest to the throne. Economic ruin ground at the foundations of the state he was sworn to protect. He never broke, not because fortune favored him, but because he had built the second castle, and he lived within it. Consider what you have been told about financial security. Diversify your holdings. Maintain insurance against every conceivable form of loss. Keep an emergency reserve. Construct a portfolio that can withstand the shock of a single market collapsing. These prescriptions are not wrong. They are, taken in isolation, genuinely prudent instruments of outer defense. But Marcus Aurelius identified a category of vulnerability that no portfolio construction and no insurance policy was ever designed to address, because it does not reside in the market. It resides in the man who manages it. The vulnerability is the mind that panics when the numbers reverse, the judgment that dissolves under sustained pressure, the capacity for catastrophic decision-making that becomes fully activated the moment circumstances shift from favorable to hostile. External wealth accumulation, practiced without any corresponding discipline of the interior, is a fortress whose outer walls grow ever more elaborate, while the foundation beneath them quietly rots. The defenses face outward toward imagined threats, while the real point of failure waits patiently inside. This is not a peripheral observation from the Stoic tradition. It is the central and organizing thesis of Marcus Aurelius's entire reign and his entire philosophical practice. He governed an empire of tens of millions of souls, managed treasuries, commanded armies, presided over courts of law, and navigated the complex and lethal politics of imperial Rome, all while simultaneously undergoing what historians describe as one of the most unrelenting series of crises in Roman history. The Antonine Plague alone is estimated to have claimed the lives of 5 million people. The Marcomannic Wars dragged across 2 decades of brutal frontier conflict, and yet the accounts we have of Marcus during these periods do not describe a man in disintegration. They describe a man at his post, functioning, judging, deciding, holding. This was not natural temperament. This was the product of deliberate interior construction. The man who accumulates external wealth without developing this interior architecture has, in truth, built something fundamentally precarious. He has created a structure whose strength he cannot verify until it is tested under load. And by the time the load arrives, it is too late to begin construction. This is the error most commonly made. and it is made not from laziness, but from a profound misallocation of attention. The culture of financial planning devotes extraordinary sophistication to modeling external risk. It maps market cycles, stress tests portfolios, hedges against currency fluctuation, and accounts for political instability. What it cannot map is the internal state of the man who will be required to hold steady inside all of that turbulence. External wealth without an inner citadel is, in the words of the most precise possible diagnosis, a fortress with no floor. What follows in this examination is not motivational philosophy repurposed for a modern audience. It is not a reinterpretation of ancient wisdom softened for contemporary sensibilities. What you will encounter here is the one Stoic law that Marcus Aurelius practiced as a daily discipline throughout his reign as emperor. The law that allowed him to function at the highest level of worldly responsibility while being subjected to pressures that broke other men of far lesser burdens. This law is not about endurance in the sense of survival. It is not about maintaining composure under duress. It is a structural principle, a law of the interior that, once understood and properly installed, renders the practitioner genuinely independent of circumstance. Not indifferent to circumstance, independent of it. That distinction carries the entire weight of what follows. The law in question does not ask you to ignore reality or to pretend that loss does not occur. It does not demand optimism or cultivate false certainty about outcomes. What it does is more precise and more powerful than either of those postures. It concerns the precise location of your psychological sovereignty, where you have planted the flag of your identity, your judgment, and your capacity for clear action. Most men plant that flag in territory they do not own. They plant it in the market, in the opinion of others, in the continuation of circumstances that are already in motion, in the preservation of what they have already accumulated. And when those external territories shift, as they inevitably, mathematically, and without exception will, the flag falls, and the man falls with it. The Stoic law of Marcus Aurelius offers a different plot of ground entirely, ground that cannot be taken. This is the most practical wealth protection strategy ever committed to writing. Not because it promises favorable outcomes, but because it addresses the single most consistent and most devastating cause of financial destruction across every era of human civilization: the collapse of the interior mind under the weight of exterior pressure. The man who has solved that problem has, in principle, solved the deepest problem there is. Everything else, the portfolios, the strategies, the contingency plans, becomes the work of a stable hand rather than a panicked one. And the difference between those two hands, at the moments that matter most, is the difference between everything and nothing. Within the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, written not for publication, not for posterity, but as a private instrument of daily self-governance, there is an architecture. It is not visible in the way that grand theory announces itself. It does not declare itself with the formal apparatus of systematic philosophy. It is revealed instead through repetition, through the insistence of a mind returning again and again to a single organizing principle, as though to a fixed star used for navigation. That principle is this: there exists within every human being a sovereign territory. The Stoics called it the hegemonikon, the ruling mind, the governing faculty, the seat of rational judgment. It is the interior space from which all perception is assessed, all value assigned, all response initiated. It is not a metaphor. Within the Stoic framework, it is the most real thing a human being possesses, more real than property, more real than position, more real than the body that houses it. What makes the hegemonikon remarkable, within the framework Marcus constructs, is not what it can produce, but what it cannot lose. Consider the catalog of threats that constituted Marcus's daily reality. His treasury could be depleted by war. His armies could be defeated in the field. His generals could betray him. His citizens could die in their millions from plague. His own body, which suffered from persistent illness throughout his reign, could fail him. And all of these things, in varying degrees, came to pass. Yet not one of them could enter this interior chamber and rearrange what was there. The hegemonikon, if properly governed, stands outside the reach of every force that moves within the external world. It cannot be taxed by any authority. It cannot be stolen by any thief. It cannot be bankrupted by any market. It cannot be burned by any fire. Understanding this is not the beginning of comfort. It is the beginning of a genuine and durable form of power. Marcus returns to this point throughout the Meditations with what might initially read as obsessive repetition, but which reveals itself upon deeper engagement as the systematic reinforcement of a structural truth he understood could never be stated too many times. The mind, he writes, takes its own form. The mind is shaped by what it dwells upon. The mind, if trained and governed, becomes a place that external events can approach but cannot fundamentally alter. This is not mysticism. It is an empirical observation about the mechanics of consciousness. When a man knows with genuine certainty that his identity and his capacity for judgment do not reside in his net worth, his reputation, his position, or the continuation of his present circumstances, then none of those things can be used against him. He is, in the most precise sense of the word, unconquerable. The political and philosophical tradition of Rome inherited from Greece a profound respect for reason as the governing principle of the ordered human life. But Marcus pressed beyond the conventional Stoic inheritance by treating this principle not merely as an ethical ideal, but as a daily operational practice. His Meditations are not a treatise composed from the calm remove of a scholar's study. They were written on campaign, in the field, between military decisions that cost human lives. They were written by a man who was simultaneously practicing what he was recording. This detail carries enormous evidential weight. The inner citadel was not a concept Marcus contemplated in leisure. It was the instrument he reached for every morning before the demands of empire arrived at his tent. What does it mean, in concrete terms, to govern this territory? It means examining, with rigorous and unhurried attention, the judgments you attach to the events that arrive. The Stoics were precise about this mechanism. They understood that what disturbs a man is never the event itself, but the interpretation he applies to it. A financial loss is a neutral occurrence in nature, a redistribution of numerical value across accounts. What transforms it into devastation is the layer of meaning added by the unexamined mind. The conclusion that one is ruined, that one's identity is diminished, that recovery is impossible, that the foundation of one's life has been removed. Marcus's governing principle interrupts this chain at the point of interpretation. It asks, what is actually here? Not what does this feel like? Not what story does this trigger? But what, stripped of all imposed meaning, is actually present? The answer to that question is almost always far less catastrophic than the unexamined mind reports. This practice of rigorous examination is not naturally comfortable, and Marcus was never naive about its difficulty. Throughout the Meditations, he acknowledges the persistent pull of the passions. the anger that wants to override judgment, the fear that wants to contract the field of vision, the grief that wants to collapse all perspective into a single point of pain. He does not pretend these forces do not exist. He acknowledges them with the precision of a diagnostician who has studied his own pathology in exhaustive detail. What he refuses to grant them is sovereignty. They may arise, they will not command. And that distinction between an emotion that is acknowledged and one that is obeyed is the functional definition of what it means to govern the inner citadel. The practical consequence of this governance, when applied to the domain of material wealth, is not small. It means that every decision you make regarding your resources, when to act, when to hold, when to exit, when to commit, is made from a position of interior stability rather than interior chaos. The decision made from the citadel and the decision made from panic may occupy the same moment in time and involve the same objective information, but they are made by two fundamentally different instruments. One instrument is calibrated, the other is bent by the force of unprocessed fear. The material outcomes produced by these two instruments, compounded over years and across hundreds of decisions, diverge to a degree that no external strategy can compensate for. There is a dimension of the hegemonikon that is frequently underappreciated even by those who engage seriously with Stoic philosophy, and it concerns the nature of what Marcus calls the good. For the Stoics, the only unconditional good, the only thing whose value cannot be revoked by fortune, is virtue, understood as the proper exercise of rational judgment. Wealth, health, reputation, influence. These are what Marcus calls preferred indifference. They are to be pursued and, when obtained, wisely managed. But they are not goods in the deepest sense, because they are not permanent. They belong to the external column, and a man who treats them as unconditional goods has, in the Stoic diagnosis, made a foundational error. He has constructed his identity on terrain that the universe can revoke at any moment, and it will, eventually, revoke it. This does not lead Marcus to asceticism or to a dismissal of material prudence. He was, after all, the administrator of the wealthiest and most complex economy of his era. He understood the practical value of material resources with far more sophistication than most of those who write about him. But his relationship to those resources was governed by a hierarchy that most people invert. He held them as a craftsman holds his tools, with skill, with care, with full engagement, while never mistaking the tools for the craftsman. The moment the tools are lost, the craftsman remains. He still knows what to do. He still possesses the judgment that created the tools in the first place. The inner citadel is not the renunciation of wealth. It is the condition under which wealth can be created, managed, and if necessary, rebuilt, without the man who manages it being destroyed in the process. What Marcus demonstrates, and what the historical record of his reign makes evident, is that this interior architecture produces a specific quality of presence in the world. The man who has built the citadel does not become passive or detached. He does not withdraw from the theater of action into contemplative paralysis. He becomes, on the contrary, more fully engaged because his engagement is no longer distorted by the static of unprocessed fear. He can see clearly because he is not protecting himself from what he sees. He can act decisively because his action is not contaminated by the need for a particular outcome to preserve his sense of self. This clarity is perhaps the most undervalued form of competitive advantage that exists in any domain of human activity, including the domain of wealth creation and preservation. Marcus understood that this kind of clarity could not be achieved once and then assumed. It required maintenance. The meditations themselves are, in this reading, a maintenance log, a daily record of a man checking the structural integrity of his interior architecture, identifying where the walls had begun to erode under the pressure of recent events, and performing the necessary repair before the damage spread. This is a practice, not an achievement. It is something that must be returned to, daily, with honesty and without sentiment. The man who did this habitually was Marcus Aurelius. The result of that habit, observed across decades of some of the most extreme circumstances any ruler has ever faced, was a mind that held its form. Rhetorical question: what would it be worth to you, in purely practical terms, stripped of all philosophical sentiment, to know that no market reversal, no business failure, no betrayal, and no accumulation of simultaneous disasters could cause you to make the catastrophic decision? What would it be worth to possess the one instrument of wealth management that can't be taken from you, that appreciates under pressure rather than depreciating, and that functions best precisely when every other instrument is failing? You do not need to answer with enthusiasm. Sit with the question. The answer is the reason Marcus Aurelius is still being studied by those who seek not comfort, but dominion. The inner citadel, understood in its fullness, is not a defensive posture. It is a generative one. The man who has established sovereignty over his interior state does not merely avoid catastrophic decisions. He creates the conditions under which insight, creative force, and genuine strategic clarity become consistently available. These are not poetic descriptions of mental states. They are the functional capacities that separate those who respond to catastrophe with creative intelligence from those who merely survive it. Marcus Aurelius built an empire-sustaining instrument, and he built it in the only location in all of existence where it was permanently safe: inside himself, in the one chamber that no force on earth could reach. To neglect this construction is not merely an oversight. Within the framework Marcus presents, it is the defining error of a human life. Every other form of preparation, financial, strategic, relational, operates at a level below the level of the governing mind. They are all, without exception, dependent on the quality of the instrument that deploys them. A sophisticated strategy in the hands of a panicked and uncentered mind is not a sophisticated strategy. It is sophisticated kindling for the fire that panic will eventually set. The work of building the inner citadel is therefore not supplementary to the work of building wealth. It is logically, structurally, and practically prior to it. It is the work that makes all other work coherent. There is a line in the meditations so precise, so unadorned, and so absolute in its implications that it functions less as a philosophical statement and more as a surgical instrument. Marcus writes, "Some things are within our power, while others are not. This is not, as it might first appear, a counsel of passive resignation. It is the articulation of the most consequential distinction a human mind can draw. A razor-sharp division of the entire contents of existence into two categories, and the foundation upon which the entire architecture of Stoic practice is constructed. The Stoics called this division the dichotomy of control, and Marcus returned to it with the regularity of a man who understood that its implications could never be fully absorbed in a single sitting. It had to be practiced until it became structural, until the division was not merely known, but inhabited. On one side of this division sits a precise and relatively small category, what you can actually control, not what you believe you can influence, not what you hope to shape through effort and persistence, but what is, in the strict and unavoidable sense, within the domain of your sovereign will. Marcus identifies this with characteristic precision. Your judgments, meaning the interpretations you apply to events. Your intentions, meaning the direction in which you point your will. Your responses, meaning the actions you choose to take in the face of what arrives. Your character, meaning the quality of the instrument you bring to every encounter with the world. This is the column of genuine sovereignty. It is smaller than almost anyone initially believes it to be, and it is more powerful than almost anyone initially understands. On the other side of the division sits everything else: markets and the forces that move them, other people and the choices they make, disease and the paths it takes through populations, natural disaster and the timing of its arrival, the economy and the invisible aggregate of millions of decisions that produces its shape at any given moment, time itself and the inevitable transformation of every present circumstance into something different from what it currently is. This is the column of the not in your control, and it is vast. It contains virtually everything that the conventional financial mind is preoccupied with modeling, predicting, and attempting to defend against. The great irony of conventional financial strategy is that it dedicates its most sophisticated energies to the column it cannot govern. The fatal error, and Marcus describes it as fatal not with hyperbole, but with the precision of a man who has watched it destroy people, is to invest your peace, your decisions, and your identity into the second column. This is the investment that cannot pay. Not because the things in the second column are not real or not consequential. They are both. A market crash is entirely real and genuinely consequential. The diagnosis of a serious illness is real and consequential. The betrayal of a trusted partner is real and consequential. Marcus does not dispute any of this. What he disputes is the logic of an interior response that treats these events as though they have the power to determine who you are and what you are capable of. They have no such power unless you have granted it to them. And that grant, made unconsciously and out of habit, is the source of almost all financial catastrophe that is not caused by simple ignorance. Consider the mechanics of what happens inside an unprotected mind when a significant financial loss occurs. The event arrives as information. A portfolio has declined in value. A business has failed to generate expected revenue. A key relationship has dissolved. In the mind that has not internalized the dichotomy of control, this information is immediately processed not as data, but as verdict. The decline becomes proof of failure. The revenue shortfall becomes evidence of inadequacy. The dissolved relationship becomes a wound to the fabric of identity. And from this processing, which occurs in fractions of a second, well beneath the level of conscious deliberation, a cascade of distorted responses is launched. The mind contracts. The field of vision narrows. The capacity for strategic thought is suppressed by the hormonal machinery of perceived threat. And in this contracted, narrowed, suppressed state, decisions are made that compound the original loss by factors that sober analysis, performed afterward, finds almost incomprehensible. Marcus saw this pattern operate in the most powerful men of his era. Senators who had governed provinces crumbled under personal financial reversals because their identity had been constructed entirely from the materials of the second column. From wealth, from position, from the continuation of favorable circumstances. When those circumstances changed, the men changed with them, because there was nothing inside that had been built to stand independent of what was outside. This observation is not a condemnation. It is a diagnosis, and the diagnosis is as accurate today as it was in the 2nd century. Because the structure of the human mind has not changed, and neither has the structure of the universe that tests it. The Stoic law, applied to the domain of wealth, operates with surgical precision on this exact mechanism. It does not instruct you to feel nothing when significant losses occur. Marcus was not an advocate of emotional suppression. The Meditations are, among other things, a deeply intimate record of a man contending with genuine pain, genuine exhaustion, and genuine grief. What the law instructs is something more precise, that the feeling must not be granted the authority to generate the decision. The loss may be registered, the discomfort may be acknowledged, but neither is permitted to occupy the seat of the hegemonikon, the governing faculty, from which the response will be directed. That seat belongs to reason, and reason alone. This is not a moral prescription. It is an engineering specification for a mind that must function under load. The dichotomy of control, once genuinely internalized, also transforms the relationship to the future in a way that has profound and direct consequences for wealth creation. One of the primary forces that undermine strategic action is the chronic preoccupation with outcomes that cannot be controlled. The entrepreneur who launches a venture while consumed with anxiety about whether the market will receive it has split his available force. Half is directed toward the work of creation. The other half is perpetually deployed in a futile attempt to pre-secure an outcome that depends on forces outside his column. This split is not merely inefficient, it is corrosive. The anxiety does not protect against failure. It diminishes the quality of the work that is the only actual influence available on the probability of success. Marcus understood this as the economics of attention. The mind has a finite and precious resource, the capacity for clear, directed, undivided engagement with what is actually present and actually within its power. Every unit of that resource directed toward the second column, toward the worry about what cannot be controlled, is a unit stolen from the first column, where all genuine work is done. The Stoic law of the dichotomy is, in this framing, an act of radical resource allocation. Withdraw every unit of cognitive and emotional investment from the column you cannot govern. Concentrate the full force of your attention and will on the column you can. The result is not detachment. It is an intensity of engagement with what is actually real and actually actionable, that those who have never practiced it find difficult to imagine. There is a counter-argument that presents itself here with some regularity, and it deserves a precise response because Marcus himself would have given one. The argument runs as follows. If you train yourself to be emotionally non-invested in outcomes, you lose the motivational force that drives sustained effort. You become indifferent, and indifference is the enemy of achievement. This argument misunderstands the Stoic position at a fundamental level. Marcus was not indifferent to outcomes. He cared, with consuming seriousness, about the health of his empire, the welfare of his citizens, the success of his military campaigns, and the justice of his legal decisions. What he refused was the specific form of investment that makes the quality of your interior state contingent on whether those outcomes materialize as intended. You can care deeply about where you are going without allowing the uncertainty of arrival to destabilize the clarity with which you navigate. The difference between these two modes, caring without attachment to outcome versus caring with identity staked on outcome, is the difference that Marcus spent his entire reign enacting. In one mode, the failure of a venture is information that redirects strategy. In the other mode, it is a verdict on the person who attempted it. The first mode produces iteration, resilience, and compounding learning. The second mode produces the psychological pattern that Marcus would diagnose without hesitation: a man who has surrendered his sovereign territory to forces that were never his to control, and who is therefore perpetually at the mercy of a universe that has never promised to arrange itself according to human preference. The dichotomy of control is not a consolation for those who have lost. It is a preparation for those who intend to build. It is the operating principle of an interior architecture that processes every event, favorable or hostile, as raw material to be assessed, responded to from the first column, and converted into forward motion. The man who has mastered this distinction does not become invulnerable to loss. He becomes genuinely capable of surviving it without being destroyed by it, and therefore genuinely capable of the sustained engagement that wealth creation at any meaningful level requires. The distinction sounds modest. Its implications are not. What Marcus ultimately reveals, through the dichotomy and through the entire architecture of the inner citadel, is that the most dangerous thing a man can do with his mind is to locate its value in the second column. Not because the things there are unimportant. They are critically important, and Marcus governed millions of them with extraordinary care. But because their impermanence is absolute. Every item in the second column will, without exception, eventually shift, diminish, or disappear. The empire that Marcus governed does not exist today. Every strategic alliance he forged has dissolved. Every financial instrument of his era has long since ceased to function. What he was practicing in the meditations was the construction of something that none of those forces could touch. A quality of mind that remained sovereign through all of it. That is the law. It is not a suggestion. It was operative before you encountered it. And it will remain operative long after you have decided what to do with it. Wallace Wattles, in his foundational text on the laws of wealth creation, issues a command that is at once simple in its statement and almost impossibly demanding in its execution. He instructs the practitioner to act with unwavering faith, to hold the vision of what is being created with a certainty that does not capitulate to the evidence of present circumstances. He specifies without ambiguity that this faith must remain intact, not as a general disposition, but as an active, directing force in every decision and every act. It must not waver. It must not be colored by doubt. And it must not be contaminated by the anxiety that attends the distance between present reality and intended result. This is the requirement, what Wattles does not supply, because it was not within the scope of his particular doctrine, is the interior architecture that makes this requirement fulfillable. Consider the specific conditions under which Wattles' faith must operate. You have committed to a creative vision. You have organized your actions, your decisions, and your resources in accordance with a definite purpose. And then the market moves against you in the week that your venture launches. A partner whose resources and competence you factored into your calculations betrays the agreement. A crisis arrives, economic, personal, institutional, that attacks the preconditions upon which your strategy was built. In these moments, which are not hypothetical but are the ordinary furniture of any serious undertaking, Wattles instructs you to hold, to not release the vision, to not allow the conditions to renegotiate the terms of your commitment. He is telling you what must be done, but the question that his text leaves open is this: what is the interior instrument by which a man actually does it? What is the room in which Wattles' faith lives when everything outside the room is in destruction? The answer, examined from the vantage point of Marcus Aurelius' doctrine, is precise and structural. The room is the inner citadel, The faith Wattles demands is not a floating, formless attitude of positivity. It is a specific interior posture, a refusal to allow external evidence to colonize the governing faculty and renegotiate the judgments it has already made from a position of clear deliberation. When Wattles says, "Hold the vision," he is describing an act of the hegemonikon. He is describing the sovereign faculty maintaining its established position against the pressure of hostile circumstances. And this maintenance, this refusal to be dislodged, is not naturally available to the mind that has never practiced the governance Marcus describes. Without the citadel, the faith Wattles prescribes exists as an intention without a container. It dissolves at the first impact because there is no interior structure capable of holding it against the force of what arrives. The relationship between these two doctrines is therefore not merely complementary. It is structural and sequential. Wattles provides the directive, hold the vision with faith, and Marcus provides the mechanism by which the directive becomes executable. The citadel is not a supplement to Wattles' certain way. It is the precondition of it. A man who attempts to practice Wattles' principles without first having established the interior sovereignty Marcus describes will find that his faith functions precisely as long as circumstances remain favorable, and fails precisely when it is most needed, at the sadhana moment of genuine pressure. This is not a failure of commitment. It is a failure of architecture. The commitment was built on ground that could not support it. There is a precise historical dimension to this convergence that deserves attention. Wattles was writing in the early 20th century, addressing a readership situated in the specific conditions of industrial era economic life. The anxiety of scarcity, the uncertainty of emerging markets, the psychological weight of poverty as an inherited identity. Marcus Aurelius was writing in the 2nd century, addressing, as he himself acknowledged, only his own mind, in the private record of a man attempting to govern an empire that was simultaneously the greatest and most pressured civilization on earth. They did not know each other. They inhabited entirely different worlds, separated by 18 centuries of human development. And yet both arrived at the same operative truth, that the quality of the interior state is the decisive variable in every encounter with the external world. The reverse bridge does not require intellectual charity to cross. The convergence is not constructed. It is simply what becomes visible when the analysis goes deep enough. What Marcus provides that Wattles leaves implicit is the specific practice by which the interior state is defended against the natural human tendency to allow external circumstances to function as the primary evidence about the nature of reality. Wattles instructs you to see abundance where others see scarcity, to hold the formless substance in the posture of faith rather than the posture of fear. Marcus instructs you in the daily discipline by which the mind that has been pressed into the posture of fear is returned by deliberate and practiced effort to its proper seat of judgment. Together, these two doctrines form a complete instrument: the vision and the citadel, the direction and the container, the law of what to create and the law of what to protect the creation from. Without the second, the first is perpetually vulnerable. With it, the faith Wattles demands becomes not an aspiration, but an engineered capacity. Wattles is explicit in his most foundational passages about the precise mechanism by which wealth creation is undermined from within. He states that action performed from a state of anxiety carries within it the signature of that anxiety, that it communicates through every channel of engagement a vibrational quality of doubt and fear that is antithetical to the creative process. He is describing not a moral failure, but a technical one. The anxious action is a corrupted signal. It moves through the world carrying the impression of its own defeat. And the man who acts from that state does not merely face reduced probability of success. He actively generates the conditions of his failure by the quality of the force he is deploying. This is Wattles' warning. It is precise, and it is, from the perspective of Marcus Aurelius' doctrine, entirely explicable. Marcus provides what might be called the mechanics of why this corruption occurs. The mechanism is the absence of the inner citadel, the condition in which the governing faculty has been vacated and replaced by the automatic, unreflective response to external stimulus. When a man has no sovereign interior chamber, there is a direct and unobstructed line between what happens outside him and what state he occupies inside. A hostile event arrives, a financial reversal, a professional rejection, a sudden deterioration of conditions. And there is nothing in the interior architecture to intercept it before it reaches the seat of decision. It lands directly on the executive function. The man is now deciding from within a state that he did not choose and cannot, in that moment, examine clearly, because the faculty of clear examination has been overwhelmed by the force of the event itself. From this state, which is the default state of the unfortified mind under pressure, a predictable series of behaviors emerges. The man sells what he should hold because the panic requires that he do something. He abandons the vision he had constructed from a position of careful deliberation because the circumstances now feel like evidence against it. He makes the most consequential choices at the precise moment when his capacity for consequential choice is most severely degraded. He buys at the peak because the atmosphere of universal confidence has colonized his judgment. He sells at the floor because the atmosphere of universal fear has done the same. He does not recognize, in these moments, that he has surrendered his sovereign faculty to the aggregate emotional state of a crowd. A crowd that, by definition, operates with no citadel at all. This is not a market phenomenon. It is an interior phenomenon with market consequences. Marcus observed this pattern at the highest levels of Roman power with a clinical and unsentimental eye. He watched men of extraordinary intelligence and genuine strategic capability crumble under pressures far smaller than those he personally carried. And he understood that the variable was not strength of character in any conventional sense. The men who failed were not weak in the way that the word is commonly used. They were unfortified. They had never built anything inside that was designed to stand independent of external validation and favorable circumstance. Their competence was real, but it was environment dependent, functional in conditions of stability and dysfunctional the moment those conditions shifted. In the taxonomy of interior architecture, this is the most dangerous kind of competence. The kind that appears reliable until the load it was never actually designed for arrives. The Stoic law that Marcus practiced corrects this at the root by establishing genuine sovereignty over the governing faculty, by training the mind through daily discipline to maintain its proper posture even under the sustained pressure of hostile circumstances. The practitioner removes the direct line between external event and interior contamination, not because external events become less consequential, not because the man becomes unaware of or indifferent to what is happening around him, but because there is now an interior chamber that the event must pass through before it reaches the seat of decision. And within that chamber, the event is assessed rather than absorbed. It is examined before it is acted upon. The quality that Wattles demands of the practitioner's actions, the uncontaminated quality of clear creative force, undistorted by anxiety or doubt, is not an act of will performed against the tide of panic. It is the natural output of an interior apparatus that has been properly maintained. The citadel does not protect the faith. It is the condition under which faith is structurally possible. There is a passage in the Meditations that has been repeated so frequently in modern discourse that its true radicalism has been somewhat obscured by familiarity. Marcus writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." These words are often cited as a formula for resilience, as an encouragement to persist in the face of difficulty. But this reading misses the full dimension of what Marcus is actually proposing. He is not merely counseling endurance. He is articulating an active and transformative principle, a law of the interior mind by which the nature of obstacles is fundamentally altered. The fortified man does not merely survive what stands against him. He inverts it. He converts resistance into fuel and turns the force of opposition into the very mechanism of his advancement. This inversion is not metaphorical or abstract. Within the specific domain of material wealth and financial decision-making, it operates as a structural advantage with measurable consequences. When the market moves against the position of the fortified mind, the first response is not emotional. It is analytical. The loss is not absorbed as a verdict, but examined as information. What does this event reveal about the actual landscape of the domain in which you are operating? What assumptions does the reversal expose as flawed? Where has the strategy been constructed on ground that could not, in retrospect, support the weight placed on it? These are the questions of an instrument that remains functional under load. And they are the questions that generate the insights from which genuine strategic adaptation proceeds. The man with no citadel is too consumed by the emotional weight of the loss to ask any of them. A failed venture, to the man who has built the citadel, is not an identity wound. It is not evidence of inadequacy or a signal about what is and is not possible for a life. It is a course correction of a specific and valuable kind. The kind that is purchased with real stakes and therefore carries information of a quality that no amount of theoretical analysis could have produced. This is a precise inversion. The thing that the unfortified mind experiences as the most destructive possible event is, for the fortified one, the most expensive and therefore the most valuable form of feedback available. The enterprise failed. The question is not, what does this say about me? The question is, what does this teach me that I could not have learned without paying this price? And how does that teaching alter the next act? Marcus himself enacted this principle across the entirety of his reign, and the historical evidence of it is remarkable. When the Antonine Plague arrived and decimated both the population and the military capacity of the empire, Marcus did not dissolve into the paralysis of catastrophic assessment. He reorganized, he adapted the military structure. He employed new categories of soldiers and revised the fiscal instruments of the state to meet the transformed conditions. He worked within the reality that the plague had created, rather than against the fact of its existence. This is not simply an executive response to a logistical crisis. It is the active principle of impediment as advancement operating at the level of an entire civilization. The obstacle did not become a wall in the hands of the man who had built the citadel. It became a door. For the practitioner of wealth creation and preservation, this principle contains an instruction so specific and so actionable that it deserves to be held in the mind with particular care. Every circumstance that would destroy the unprotected man, the market crash, the business failure, the partnership dissolution, the regulatory reversal, the technological displacement of an entire industry, carries within it, for the fortified mind, both information and opportunity. The crash is the information that prices have been brought into alignment with a different valuation. The failure is the information that a flawed model has been eliminated, clearing the path for a more accurate one. The dissolution is the information that a particular structure of dependence was not viable, forcing the development of more resilient ones. The shield does not merely deflect the force of what arrives. It is designed, by its very nature, to convert that force. The citadel does not just protect, it transforms. The vulnerability that Marcus Aurelius diagnosed in the men around him, senators, generals, administrators, and wealthy individuals of every rank, was not a failure of intelligence or of practical capability. It was a failure of interior architecture, and it produced, with the consistency of a physical law, a single and identifiable pattern of destruction. The pattern operates through three sequential stages. First, an adverse external event arrives, a financial reversal, a hostile act, an unexpected deterioration of conditions. Second, the event triggers an emotional response in the man who has no interior chamber between stimulus and reaction. Panic, fear, rage, despair. Third, from within that emotional state, with the governing faculty compromised and the field of vision narrowed to the immediate threat, a decision is made. It is almost always the wrong decision, and it almost always compounds the original damage. This chain reaction, adverse event, emotional state, distorted decision, is the true and primary destroyer of wealth. Not the market, not the economy, not the malice or incompetence of those around you. These external forces are the stimulus that initiates the chain. But the destruction occurs inside the chain, in the transition from emotional state to consequential action. And it occurs entirely within the territory that Marcus identifies as yours to govern. This is not a consoling observation. It is a precise and somewhat uncomfortable one, because it means that the majority of the damage attributed to external causes is, in the final analysis, self-inflicted. Not through error, not through weakness of character, but through the absence of an interior architecture that was never built. Marcus watched this process operate in real time at the highest levels of power in his civilization. He saw wealthy men sell their holdings at the floor of a crisis because the atmospheric pressure of collective panic had colonized their judgment. He saw generals make catastrophic tactical errors under the emotional load of sustained adversity because there was no interior chamber in which the emotion could be assessed before it reached the decision. He saw senators, whose counsel was essential to the governance of the empire, become useless in proportion to the severity of the circumstances they were supposed to illuminate, because their utility as deliberative instruments degraded precisely when precision was most essential. The pattern was consistent across age, wealth, education, and rank. The variable was always the same. What made Marcus different? What allowed him to function at the level of sustained, precise, effective governance through 2 decades of compounding catastrophe was the daily practice of constructing and maintaining the chamber. The meditations reveal a man who arrived at each morning not with the assumption that his interior architecture was intact, but with the disciplined intention to verify it and restore it wherever it had been compromised by the previous day's events. This is not a naturally occurring state. It is a built one. And the building requires the recognition that the chain reaction, event, emotion, distorted decision, is not inevitable. It is only inevitable in the absence of the structure that interrupts it. The interruption that the Citadel provides is not the suppression of emotion. Marcus does not counsel the elimination of feeling as a response to loss or adversity. He counsels the refusal to grant feeling executive authority, the refusal to allow the emotional state that an event produces to function as the governing premise of the decision that follows. This distinction is architecturally precise. The event may cause pain. The pain is registered. And then the governing faculty, which has been trained to maintain its sovereign posture under exactly these conditions, examines the situation with the clarity that pain has not been allowed to distort. The decision that emerges from this examination is not cold. Marcus was not cold. It is accurate, and accuracy, in the domain of financial decision-making under pressure, is the quality upon which everything else depends. Marcus Aurelius did not treat the inner citadel as a possession to be discovered and thereafter assumed. He treated it as a construction to be built and, once built, maintained by a discipline that admitted no interruption and no exception. The maintenance method he practiced was not abstract or contemplative in the passive sense. It was a deliberate, daily engagement with the specific conditions under which the citadel would be required to hold. Engaged in advance of those conditions, in the controlled environment of a prepared mind, before the urgency of actual crisis distorted the exercise. The Stoics called this practice premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. And in the hands of Marcus, it was not a technique of anxiety management, but an act of engineering. Consider the precise nature of what this practice involves. Marcus would, as part of his morning discipline, deliberate upon the adversities that the day and the broader span of his life might bring, not with the catastrophizing spiral of an anxious mind running uncontrolled, but with the measured and intentional attention of an architect examining a structural design against the loads it might be required to bear. He would sit with the thought of significant financial loss, of the kind that does not merely reduce comfort, but fundamentally alters the material conditions of one's life. He would hold that thought, examine his response to it, and work through deliberate practice to encounter it with the equanimity that he was training himself to produce. The event had not occurred, but the mind's response to it was already being shaped. The logic of this practice is precise and compelling. The man who first encounters the thought of a catastrophic loss in the moment that the catastrophe actually arrives has no preparation. His response is entirely raw, entirely at the mercy of the emotional machinery that crisis activates. The man who has already sat with that thought, calmly and with directed attention in the safety of a non-emergency, has done something the first man has not. He has traveled to that interior territory before the storm and begun construction. When the crisis arrives, he is not visiting the possibility of loss for the first time. He has already been there. He already knows, from direct experience, that he survived the encounter with the thought. He has, in the most literal sense, rehearsed his own resilience. This is not pessimism in any conventional sense of the word. Marcus was not a man who dwelt in anticipated misfortune or who cultivated a dark view of what the future would bring. The Meditations are the record of a man who engaged with the present with full and energetic commitment. But he distinguished rigorously between the hope that favorable circumstances would persist, a hope that the universe has never contracted to honor, and the preparation for conditions that were, in the nature of things, certain to arrive in some form. Adversity is not a possibility to be prepared for. It is a certainty to be trained for. The question is not whether the storm will come. The question is whether, when it arrives, there is a structure inside that was built to withstand it. Seneca, Marcus's Stoic predecessor, who influenced the tradition within which the meditations were composed, expressed this principle with characteristic economy. Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Seneca was not instructing the practice of morbidity. He was identifying the precise condition under which a man's choices become genuinely free. The condition in which fear of loss is no longer the operative force governing the decision. The man who has imaginatively inhabited the loss already, and who has found his capacity for deliberate thought intact on the other side of that habitation, is a man who is no longer governed by the threat of what might be taken. He has already been to the place the threat points toward, and he returned from it with his faculties functioning. This is the specific form of freedom that the premeditation of adversity produces. And it is the foundation upon which the genuine citadel is built. The financial application of this practice is direct and consequential. The man who has never imaginatively inhabited the loss of a significant portion of his wealth, who has never sat with deliberate and sustained attention with the thought of beginning again from a reduced position, carries that unexplored territory as a shadow over every decision he makes regarding that wealth. He manages his resources in such a way as to avoid not merely actual loss, but the experience of confronting the possibility of loss. This produces a characteristic form of overcaution at precisely the moments when decisive action would be most productive, and a characteristic form of panic when the avoidance fails and the encounter with loss becomes unavoidable. The shadow was always there. The premeditatio removes it by illuminating what it conceals. Marcus built this discipline into the fabric of his daily practice, with a regularity that the meditations make evident. The recurring themes on the brevity of life, on the inevitability of change, on the loss of everything external, are not evidence of a melancholy temperament. They are the traces of a man running a daily maintenance protocol on the interior architecture of his governing faculty. He was checking the walls. He was verifying that the chamber could still hold its form under the weight of the considerations he brought to it each morning. And when he found, as any honest practitioner will find, that the previous day's events had compromised the structure in some particular, he performed the repair before the damage spread. This is the discipline. It is unglamorous, and it is total. One of the most revealing dimensions of this practice, when considered in the context of wealth and material life, is what it produces in the relationship between the practitioner and risk. The man who has practiced the premeditatio at depth is not reckless. He has not eliminated the proper calibration of risk that sound judgment requires, but he has eliminated something that distorts that calibration: the contamination of risk assessment by the fear of the emotional experience of loss, as distinct from the loss itself. Many decisions that appear to be rational assessments of financial risk are, in fact, assessments of the psychological cost of encountering loss. The man who fears the emotional devastation of a specific outcome will consistently underprice upside opportunities and overprice downside risks in ways that his rational analysis, performed consciously, would not endorse. The premeditatio, practiced with honesty, separates these two assessments and allows each to operate with appropriate precision. There is a dimension of this practice that extends beyond the individual encounter with specific anticipated losses, and it concerns the cultivation of a more fundamental relationship with the impermanence of all external things. Marcus returned again and again in the meditations to the observation that everything in the domain of the not in your control is in a state of constant and irreversible change. The empire, the wealth, the relationships, the body, the reputation, all of it is in motion, all of it is transitional, all of it will, in the fullness of time, be other than it currently is. This is not a cause for despair in the Stoic framework. It is the precondition for the proper management of one's relationship to it. The man who knows, not merely believes, but has trained himself to genuinely know, that every external possession is held on temporary loan from a universe that operates on its own schedule, is a man who manages those possessions without the distortion of possessiveness. And the absence of possessiveness, the ability to hold tightly while remaining capable of releasing, is among the rarest and most practically valuable qualities in any domain of sustained material engagement. The construction method Marcus employed was not limited to morning reflection. He also made extensive use of what contemporary cognitive practice would recognize as behavioral exposure. The deliberate adoption of voluntary discomfort as a training instrument. He would, on occasion, impose restrictions on himself, reducing the quality of his diet, the comfort of his accommodations, the ease of his daily circumstances. Not as punishment and not as an ascetic ideal, but as a calibration exercise. The purpose was specific: to verify, through direct experience rather than theoretical confidence, that his equanimity was not dependent on the continuation of comfortable conditions. That the Citadel held its form not only under the imagined pressure of the premeditation, but under the actual, if modest, pressure of deliberately imposed deprivation. This behavioral dimension of Citadel construction carries a direct and underappreciated implication for the development of financial resilience. The practitioner who engages in voluntary exposure to reduced circumstances, not to the point of genuine harm, but to the point of genuine discomfort, discovers something that no amount of theoretical preparation can substitute for: direct experiential knowledge of what diminished conditions actually feel like from the inside. The discovery that almost always follows this exercise is that the experience is significantly less catastrophic than the imagination of it. The fear of loss is, in the majority of cases, more debilitating than the actual experience of loss, because the imagination of loss is uncontrolled and catastrophizing, while the experience of it is bounded, navigable, and survivable. The premeditatio reveals this through imagination. The voluntary exposure confirms it through experience. The inner citadel, once built through this combination of reflective practice and deliberate behavioral training, does not remain at the same level of development indefinitely without attention. Marcus understood this with the clarity of a man who had observed the deterioration of interior structures in himself and in those around him. The Citadel requires what he implicitly practices in the meditations: regular, honest, unsparing self-examination. Not the comfortable review of a man looking for confirmation that he is doing well, but the rigorous assessment of a master craftsman inspecting a critical structure for the earliest signs of stress fracture. Where has the equanimity been merely performed rather than genuinely inhabited? Where has the judgment been made from the second column rather than the first? Where has the governing faculty been quietly displaced by the reflex of the unexamined response? These questions, asked with honesty and without self-protection, are the ongoing maintenance work of the Citadel. They are unglamorous and essential. The tradition that Marcus inherited and refined through his own practice identifies a specific enemy of interior construction that deserves direct attention: the comfortable period. The Stoics observed, with a precision that history repeatedly confirms, that the greatest erosion of the Citadel occurs not under sustained adversity, but during extended periods of favorable circumstances. When the storms are not arriving, the temptation is to cease the practice, to allow the daily discipline of premeditation and self-examination to lapse on the reasonable feeling grounds that it is not currently needed. This is the error that leaves the structure unattended during the only period in which repair and reinforcement can be performed without the pressure of an active crisis. The storm does not announce itself in advance. The construction window is the calm that precedes it. This final point brings the architecture of Citadel construction full circle and deposits it at the most practical possible instruction. Begin now, and begin in the specific conditions of your current life, whatever those conditions are. If they are favorable, the premeditatio is most efficiently performed from within that favorability, sitting with the thought of its reversal from a position of sufficient interior distance to conduct the examination without distortion. If conditions are already difficult, the work is more urgent and the raw material is immediately available. In either case, the Citadel is built not in ideal conditions, but in actual ones, and its construction proceeds through the same sequence, regardless of what is happening outside. The deliberate confrontation with what could be lost, the honest examination of the response, the patient and repeated return to the governing faculty's proper seat, and the daily verification that the structure is holding its form. There is a specific quality that Marcus Aurelius describes across multiple passages of the Meditations that functions as the operative signal by which a man can verify whether his inner citadel is genuinely built or merely imagined. It is not a feeling of invulnerability. It is not the absence of emotional response. It is something more precise and more usable than either of those. And it concerns the altered character of the relationship between the practitioner and incoming events. Marcus describes a condition in which events cease to function as blows and begin to function as weather. Acknowledged, assessed, navigated, and released, without leaving the kind of structural mark that blows leave on the body. Consider what this distinction means in practice. A blow lands and deforms whatever it strikes. It leaves a mark, it disrupts the structural integrity of what it contacts, and the impact reverberates in a way that persists beyond the moment of contact. Weather arrives, is experienced with full sensory awareness, requires an appropriate response, and passes. The man walking in rain is not unaware of it. He feels it completely. But when the rain ceases, he continues walking without carrying the rain inside him. This is the precise quality Marcus is pointing toward. Not the elimination of the awareness that something has arrived, but the elimination of the tendency of what has arrived to leave a residue in the governing faculty that then distorts all subsequent perception and judgment. Applied to the domain of material wealth, this quality manifests in a specific and verifiable way. The loss of money becomes, for the man who has genuinely built the citadel, a problem of a practical and solvable nature. Something that belongs to the first column, where strategy and action can engage with it directly. It does not become an identity event. It does not become evidence about the nature of the person who sustained it. It does not contaminate the quality of the next decision by depositing the fear and shame and self-doubt of the previous event into the interior state from which that decision will be made. The problem is real. It is bounded. It is assessed. And it is responded to from a position of interior stability, which is also the only position from which it can be addressed with genuine effectiveness. The betrayal, in this same state of genuine fortification, becomes data, not because the harm it represents is diminished or excused, but because the governing faculty, operating from the inner citadel, is capable of extracting the relevant information. What does this reveal about this person, this structure, this assumption I was carrying? without the emotional charge of devastation overwhelming the analytical capacity that makes that extraction possible. Marcus dealt with betrayal at the highest levels of imperial power. His documented responses to it, measured, unsentimental, and notably devoid of the corrosive bitterness that such betrayals typically generate, are not evidence of a man who did not feel the impact. They are evidence of a man whose interior structure processed the impact without being reshaped by it. The signal Marcus describes is therefore not a state of imperviousness. It is a state of what might be called functional permeability. The capacity to be fully present to what is happening, to feel the weight of it without deflection or denial, and to emerge from the encounter with the governing faculty intact and capable. When this state is genuinely inhabited rather than performed, it becomes self-reinforcing. Each encounter with adversity that is processed from within the citadel, rather than from outside it, in the raw state of the unfortified response, deposits a specific form of evidence in the practitioner's interior record. The evidence that the structure held, and this accumulated evidence produces a quality of confidence that is fundamentally different from the ordinary confidence built on a history of favorable outcomes. It is confidence built on demonstrated structural integrity under load. It is the confidence that belongs to the man who has, in the most precise sense, already tested the walls. The practical consequence of reaching this state, of verifying through experience that events arrive as weather and not as blows, is that every outer pursuit the practitioner engages in becomes exponentially more productive. Not because the outer domain has changed, not because circumstances become more favorable or the challenges less severe, but because the instrument being brought to those challenges is operating without the degradation imposed by unprocessed interior damage. The strategies are cleaner, the decisions are more precisely calibrated. The capacity for sustained engagement over long periods without the erosion of panic or despair is greater. The man who operates from this foundation does not merely survive the weather of the external world. He directs his full, undiminished, undivided force into the domain of what he can actually create. And that force, properly applied, is the only real generator of durable wealth that has ever existed. Stand at the summit of what this examination has revealed and consider what it discloses about the nature of wealth in its deepest sense. Every instrument of financial protection that human ingenuity has devised, the diversified portfolio, the insurance contract, the legal structure, the emergency reserve, is an instrument of the outer domain. It operates in the column of the not in your control. It is designed to reduce the probability and magnitude of adverse outcomes that cannot ultimately be prevented, only managed. These instruments are not without value. Marcus Aurelius did not disdain the practical arts of governance or the material instruments of security. He employed them with the full sophistication of the most powerful administrator of his era. But he understood, with a clarity that has never been surpassed in the Western philosophical tradition, that every outer shield is only as effective as the inner one on which it ultimately rests. The quality of the mind that creates wealth and the quality of the mind that manages and protects it is the single most consequential variable in the entire equation. Not because outer circumstances are irrelevant, they are, as Marcus's own experience demonstrates, profoundly consequential. But because the outer circumstances can never be finally controlled, and the inner ones can, the man who has built the inner citadel brings to every encounter with the external domain a governing faculty that has been trained, tested, and verified to hold its form under load. He makes decisions from this faculty. He reads the landscape from this faculty. He deploys his resources assesses his risks, and responds to his crises from this faculty. And the decisions produced by this faculty, compounded over the full arc of a financial life, represent a magnitude of advantage over the decisions produced by an unfortified mind that no outer strategy, however sophisticated, could replicate. The synthesis of everything Marcus teaches, of the hegemonikon, the dichotomy of control, the inversion of impediment, the premeditation of adversity, and the construction of the inner chamber that no force can enter, is not ultimately a philosophy of endurance. It is a philosophy of unconditional capacity. The man who has genuinely built the inner citadel does not merely survive what the world sends. He is capable of creative, directed, intelligent engagement with those conditions, regardless of their nature. Not because he is immune to their impact, but because his capacity for response has been located in territory they cannot reach. This is the one form of wealth that cannot be taken. Not the money, not the property, not the accumulated instruments of the outer domain, the quality of the mind that created them. Sovereign, trained, clear, and unbreakable. Every outer shield depends upon this inner one, not as an inspiration, as a structural dependency. The most sophisticated external protection strategy in the world, deployed by a mind that collapses under pressure, is not protection. It is preparation for a specific kind of failure. But the inner shield, fully built, renders every outer instrument exponentially more effective. Because every outer instrument is being deployed by an instrument that is operating at the level of its actual design capacity. This is the synthesis. It is not complicated. It is simply more demanding than most are willing to acknowledge, because it requires construction in the one domain where most people have never attempted to build anything at all. The interior space that Marcus Aurelius described as the only real estate in the universe permanently, irrevocably, and unconditionally yours. Marcus Aurelius left behind a document that was never intended to be read. It was written in the margins of an empire, in the private hours of a man who held more worldly power than perhaps any individual before him, and who understood with perfect clarity that none of that power was the power he most needed to cultivate. The Meditations are not a treatise on governance or a manual of Stoic philosophy. They are the record of a man in daily, disciplined, unsparing conversation with the only sovereign he recognized as absolute. His own rational mind, what he discovered in that conversation, and what he recorded in the language of a man speaking to himself without any audience to perform for, is the teaching that you have now encountered. The man who governs this territory governs everything. This is not a motivational assertion designed to produce a feeling of possibility. It is an observation of the mechanics of how human beings actually function in the world. The governing faculty, shaped, trained, and brought to sovereign clarity, is the instrument through which every other capacity operates. The capacity for sound financial judgment is expressed through it. The capacity for strategic clarity under pressure is expressed through it. The capacity for sustained creative engagement with a definite purpose, the Waddell's capacity, the wealth-creating capacity, is expressed through it. When the instrument is clear, these capacities operate at their proper level. When the instrument is compromised by the abdication of sovereignty to external events, every capacity it is supposed to serve is degraded in proportion to the degree of that abdication. What Marcus demonstrates through the record of his reign, and what the Meditations confirm through their intimate testimony, is that this governance is available to every human being who is willing to engage in the construction. It is not a gift of temperament. It is not a privilege of birth or rank. Marcus was not constitutionally placid. The Meditations reveal, with the honesty of a man writing to no one but himself, that he was frequently fatigued, frequently irritated, frequently at war with the temptations of reactive thinking. What he possessed was not a naturally fortified interior. He possessed the discipline to build the fortification and the daily commitment to maintain it. The building is available to you. The commitment is required of you. The result is not guaranteed by anything other than the quality and consistency of the construction. There is a quality of freedom that the inner citadel produces that is frequently overlooked in discussions of Stoic philosophy. Perhaps because it is the kind of freedom that is difficult to render in a culture preoccupied with external measures of liberation. Marcus describes a man who, having established sovereignty over his governing faculty, no longer requires any particular arrangement of external circumstances in order to engage fully and productively with the world. He does not require the market to be favorable. He does not require other people to be just. He does not require fortune to be kind or circumstances to be stable. He is free from these requirements in a way that is absolute. Because his capacity to function, to create, to judge clearly, and to act decisively resides in territory that none of these external conditions can enter. This is the freedom Marcus practiced. It is the only form of freedom that cannot be revoked by anyone or anything that exists outside you. In the domain of wealth and material life, this freedom translates into a specific and practical capacity. The capacity to act with full commitment on what is possible in the present circumstances, rather than waiting for the circumstances to become what you wish they were. The man who can only act decisively when conditions are favorable is, in the deepest analysis, a man who has outsourced his agency to the conditions. He is functional only on loan. His effectiveness borrowed from the temporary arrangement of external factors that he mistakes for the source of his capacity. The man who has built the citadel understands that his capacity is not borrowed from anything. It lives in the first column. It belongs to him entirely and permanently, and from that understanding flows a quality of committed, unhesitating action in any conditions that is among the rarest and most consequentially valuable forms of human capability. Marcus Aurelius governs the legacy of Western philosophical thought on this subject, not because he theorized brilliantly about it, but because he practiced it under the most unsparing conditions of verification that history has afforded. He had every reason to fail in the interior domain. The pressures arrayed against him were of a magnitude that most people will never approach. And yet the record shows a man who held his form, who made sound judgments, who continued to function as a deliberate and rational agent throughout decades of cumulative catastrophe. This is the testimony of the law, not a promise made in the comfort of theory, but a demonstration performed under the full weight of actual consequence. That demonstration is now yours to examine and to apply. The measure of what has been transmitted here is not what you feel at the end of it. The measure is what you build with it. Feeling is in the second column. Construction is in the first. Marcus was not moved by his own writings. He used them as instruments of maintenance and repair. The knowledge of the inner citadel, possessed without the construction of the inner citadel, is precisely the kind of outer defense that looks impressive and collapses under pressure. The knowledge is the blueprint. The building is the only act that matters. The market will turn. This is not a prediction that requires any particular reading of economic indicators or any specialized knowledge of financial cycles. It is a statement of the nature of the domain. Markets have always turned. They have turned in every era, in every civilization, through every period of apparent stability and through every period of apparent collapse. The man who has constructed his security entirely in the outer domain, in the arrangements of a market that has always moved and will always move, is a man whose security is permanently provisional. He is secure until he is not, and the transition from one to the other arrives in the nature of the external world without reliable advance notice. Circumstances will shift. People will disappoint. The partner whose integrity seemed beyond question will, under sufficient pressure, reveal the limits of that integrity. The institution that appeared structurally immovable will be moved by forces that no one within it anticipated. The technology on which an entire industry's economics depended will be superseded by another. These are not pessimistic forecasts. They are observations of the pattern of the external domain across the full arc of recorded human history. Marcus Aurelius lived them in concentrated form. He recorded not their emotional impact on him, but the governing principle he applied to them. And that principle, the law of the inner citadel, the dichotomy of control, the inversion of impediment, the daily discipline of construction, produced, in the face of every one of those external shifts, a man who remained at his post, deliberating, deciding, acting, holding. None of it breaks the man who has built the citadel. This is not an aspiration. It is the logical consequence of a structural principle that Marcus Aurelius practiced, demonstrated, and bequeathed to every subsequent era that has had the seriousness to engage with it. The conditions that break the unfortified man are precisely the conditions that reveal the citadel of the fortified one. Because it is under load that the structure is most clearly seen. The reversal that destroys the man who has planted his flag in the second column is the same reversal that, for the man who has planted his flag in the first, becomes the occasion for the clearest expression of what he has built. The storm does not break the citadel. It makes it visible. The decree that follows belongs not to this examination, but to the domain of your own volition. In the comments below this record, write 3 words. Nothing breaks me, not as a declaration of current attainment. Marcus himself would have found such a declaration suspicious, but as the statement of a governing intention, an acknowledgement that you have understood what has been revealed here, that you are willing to locate your sovereignty in the territory that cannot be revoked, and that you are prepared to do the work of construction that this law requires. 3 words, the weight of an emperor's lifetime behind them. The citadel is built in the interior. Its material is the quality of your daily attention. Its architect is your governing faculty. Its enemy is the habitual abdication of that faculty to forces that were never yours to control. And its defense, once built, once tested, once verified to hold its form under load, is the one fortress that no siege can take, that no army can enter, that no market can bankrupt, that no betrayal can bring down. Build it. Return to it each morning. Verify its walls. Repair what the previous day has worn, and understand, with the calm certainty of a man who has studied what the most powerful mind of the ancient world discovered at the cost of a lifetime's unrelenting practice. The only thing on earth that is permanently, unconditionally, irrevocably yours is the quality of the mind you bring to everything.